It's the After Show with TelecomTV's Guy Daniels and Ray Maistre.
Yes, welcome to the After Show on TelecomTV. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content, and we are broadcasting live and waiting to hear from you, our audience, at the end of day 3, the final day of the DSP Leaders Summit on 5G Evolution. We have a great lineup of guests joining us again today, and we are going to answer as many of your questions as we can. So if you haven't yet got in touch, then do so now, and the sooner the better. Please don't leave it too late. Now, co-hosting the After Show is, of course, Ray Maistre, Editorial Director at TelecomTV. Ray, today's main theme has been Open RAN. What have been the highlights for you?
Well, Guy, it's hard to have any discussion these days about mobile networks without including the impact of Open RAN, even though it's still early days for such disaggregated network options. The claimed benefits are compelling: cost and operational efficiencies, a catalyst for innovation. But there are still so many questions left to answer, and the main one being, will it all be worth it? An increasing number of large and influential operators most definitely believe it is going to be worth it, and I think we're going to see a shift in the dynamics of the mobile network ecosystem as a result. In the meantime, legacy 5G is underpinning the enterprise service efforts of the operators, and that's a key proving ground for 5G.
Yeah, spot on, Ray. The evolving dynamics around 5G are absolutely fascinating. The stakes really are sky high. So on with the show, and joining us live on the programme today are Brendan O'Reilly, Group Chief Technology Officer for BAI Communications, Terje Jensen, SVP Head of Global Network Architecture and Director 5G Readiness, Strategic Programme Technologies and Services at Telenor, Patrick Rokita, Vice President Systems Architecture at NetNumber, and Francis Haysom, Principal Analyst with Appledore Research. Hello everyone, very good to see you all again. We've got lots of audience questions to get through in the next 45 minutes or so, not just on Open RAN, but also on 5G Core and 5G Market. So Ray, over to you.
Okay, thanks Guy. And Francis, we'll start with you, but before we get into the first question, a quick question for you, and this is one we've been asking of all our after-show guests this year. What got you into telecoms? How did you start your career in this industry?
Okay, directly after I completed my PhD, I joined a small software house. It did lots of things, but one of the things it did was telco. And I worked on the early systems for Vodafone in terms of alarm management. And then later for BT in terms of call center management and call center handling. And I guess that's the thing that increasingly everything I did within that software house became about telco. And that ultimately led me to go into what BSS and billing, and ultimately an OSS startup. So it was always exciting, and became more exciting as I got drawn in.
And the excitement levels never wane, do they? I mean, it's this is a great industry to be involved in. Okay, so our first audience question coming to you first, Francis, is Open RAN requires technology developers to play nice together. Is this possible?
I think it is. I think it is possible, but I think there's an underpinning word which is bandied around a lot. Which is it will only succeed with true partnership. The challenge for telco is it has to some extent, yes, it has strong vendors, but a lot of the way telco comes to things is to look for very clear standards, strong RFPs, and often they can kind of lead to a conflicted situation. And a lot of the benefits of things like developer cooperation, etc., kind of need those barriers to be in some way broken down. So if telcos and telco vendors can find a way to what I would term is get a true partnership, and that doesn't mean doing crazy stuff to get together. It means about having a clear relationship across development and not seeing it as simply it's your problem or it's my problem. So I think it's possible. There's some challenges. I think the telco's RFP focus can often get in the way. And Rakuten is Rakuten, which is obviously the Open RAN poster child, is very clear. We don't do RFPs, and we kind of need to move to a new model to get this partnership there.
Okay, yeah, interesting. It's there's a lot of moving parts here, and it'll be interesting to see if new models of engagement and partnership emerge. Okay, anybody? If there's nobody else that wants to comment on technology developers playing nice, we will move on to the next audience question from today. Thank you, Francis. Back over to you, Guy.
Yep, thanks, Ray. Patrick, also the first time on the after show for you. So we've got to ask you, what got you into telecoms? How did you get your start in this industry?
Yeah, to me it was somehow like a natural path, because since my childhood as a child, I already enjoyed a lot building electronic circuits. Later, with the first computers available, I did already a lot of programming at the time at the machine code and assembler level. Then during my time at the university, during my study, I did computer-aided design, did my doctorate in electrical sciences. So my professional career started right away in the telecommunication industry with hardware-specific telecom products, starting with computer-aided circuit diagram capture, going over printed circuit boards, thermal emission simulation, electromagnetic interferences. And I then also witnessed the switch from special purpose proprietary hardware over to this soft switch based design. And there I could basically enjoy the other talent of mine, which was the programming. So starting developing telco as a software. And that's how I evolved over from 2G, 3G, over 4G, LTE, IMS, and now ended up with 5G core. Always probably do the same services, just always a little bit different.
It's been quite a journey through the generations. I mean, you've seen quite a few changes there. It's always good to get that science bug very early. So many opportunities available once you've got into science and technology. Now, Patrick, we've got another audience question here, which I think is ideal for you. How flexible is the 5G core? Do the specifications make it easy to deploy in a distributed and even localized way, for example, in a private network?
Yeah, so I believe that, and I'm convinced that this is really right or correct, that what is currently happening in the radio access network with Open RAN has already happened in the 5G core space. To my opinion, it's really flexible, and from many aspects. One of the aspects is the 3GPP defined architecture, which is this time service-based. So network functions can basically register on a service bus in a network function repository, and their capabilities can be discovered by other products or network functions from there. So you can easily add or remove services from your 5G core. The discovery of the services that are currently available can be done in a global network as well as in a regional network. The network function registrars can basically proxy any registration or discovery request to central entities or handle them directly locally or regionally. So there is a lot of flexibility in the 5G core architecture as defined by the 3GPP standard that makes it per se or per definition interoperable across the products of multiple vendors. And then there are at least two additional aspects to the flexibility of the 5G core I would like to mention. One is the implementation of the 5G core network function, which is now based on so-called containers, which are small pieces of software units that can be moved easily from the supplier to the vendor or to on-prem, where the 5G core operates, whether as a test system or as a production system. And the 5G core utilizes a lot of IT-based technology based on let's say, the IT HTTP2 protocol, and also interfaces defined according to open API specs. So the flexibility that we know since years from the IT industry is now basically utilized by the 5G core network. And last but not least, mentioning the IT cloud native deployment models that has been so successful for years, that are giving you basically a lot of power in terms of orchestrating these small software units, these containers, in a 5G core environment. You can use either in-house developed software units, or you can reuse units that are already existing. So basically the amount of third-party software, to my opinion, will increase in 5G core network compared to in-house development as we've seen it in the 2G, 3G networks. And in summary, all these three dimensions, architecture, implementation, and deployment power, give you a lot of flexibility. And I would just wish that such a flexibility can also be seen at the OSS layer, because in the end, it will not be helpful to build a flexible 5G core and then trying to somehow connect it to some legacy OSS system via legacy protocol. So yeah, this flexibility needs to simply hit also the OSS layer as it will hit the RAN, and maybe also NFV management or orchestration layer.
Oh, good points, Patrick. Thanks very much. And as you say, the 5G core really has shown what's possible. It's where we go next is going to be very interesting. Brendan, you'd like to come in on this point? You've got a ton of experience in this area.
Yeah, I think Patrick makes a great point around flexibility from an operator's point of view and a technology viewpoint. But what it also does is give optionality to the end users, such as the enterprise customers who are looking for these services. And by that, I mean they can either continue to work with an operator and look for a network slice in the future to be able to get the services that they require. Or, as you mentioned in the question, they can move forward with a private network that they can hone and build to suit their needs. I think it's ultimately that optionality that allows the end user to build their business around the solution and vice versa. That really is the leap board that the industry is looking for, because when enterprise customers have options, that generates competition, and competition is good for our industry. So I think it's great from an operator and a vendor viewpoint. I think it's fascinating from an end user viewpoint, and that's the bit that I find really exciting.
Yeah, thanks very much for those comments, Brendan. But all you want to come in. Let me go to Terry first.
Yeah, now just to add on, I fully agree what the two previous speakers were talking about. So we have also just to give some examples on that we have deployed on the core in a very distributed manner. For example, in some cases, just to demonstrate that it's actually doable and it's efficient to do with local switching, for example. And then that in combination with centralizing something, centralizing some functions, even on a public cloud, partly on the other side of the globe. And then we're also running this on a localized manner, for example, like an autonomous core network for a private network. So that's also doable. And just back to Brendan's point as well. So demonstrating, for example, slicing and giving priority, for example, to emergency services, or even, for example, also some demonstration of slicing and giving priority, for example, to a broadcasting setup is also providing a lot of good insights. And then combining this with, for example, an autonomous core network supporting the broadcasting, not the studio setup, but more the distributed setup from contributing systems from, for example, a stadium, an arena, and a lot of interesting use cases which actually can be used then from the enterprise customer point of view.
Thank you, Terry. And Francis.
I was just going to reiterate the point. The key thing is the 5G core it fundamentally disconnects you from a box-like view of the core. Software can be placed anywhere, and probably actually more importantly as well, it gives us the opportunity to combine the core with other third-party software that in the existing setup very much can only access effectively the top layer of it. So there's the opportunity to get much more specific in different industry verticals as well, and that's key.
Great, thanks everyone. Some great points there. Well, let's move on, and I'll hand over to Ray for our next question.
Thanks, Guy. So, Brendan, we're coming to you with our question about how you got into the telecoms sector. How did you get your start in this industry?
By a glorious coincidence. So when I started working, I actually went to an agency and I had an interview with One to One, for those of you who remember them, in Boreham Wood. And the interview was for a maternity cover in the HR department. I'm afraid possibly my people skills at the time didn't allow me to be successful in that role, but they brought me back for a interview in the radio planning department, and I spent some time talking to One to One, and that's how I eventually joined the telco industry. And what a glorious coincidence it was for me back in the early 2000s.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure your human resource skills are much better these days.
Well, I hope so.
Sure
I hope so.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, great story there. Okay, let's come to the question that has come in from our audience, and the question is, how is 5G changing the nature of neutral host network deployments? So this relates directly to your line of work now. And can Open RAN benefit neutral hosts? Will the cloud platform nature of such architectures make infrastructure sharing easier?
So I think as a first point, 5G is changing the way that operators deploy networks. Firstly, I think with the spectrum assets that they have at hand, they're looking at how they can deliver the capacity and the latency required to do all of the glorious things that we all believe 5G will be able to do in the coming years. And with that comes an increased cost. And one of the good points of neutral host networks is that it takes the cost and shares it equally amongst all of the players, and also looks at funding models like government investment, grants, etc. So I believe that neutral hosts will allow 5G operators around the world to be able to deploy at scale quickly and to their customers' needs, not just from a consumer point of view, but from an enterprise point of view, as I mentioned earlier. And I think neutral hosts and private networks effectively go hand in hand. And the reason I say that is, deploying in quite tough environments, being able to deploy with the end user's needs in mind are really important from a neutral host and private network viewpoint. And the other positive about private networks is it gives the private network owner optionality further on, because they don't have to stick with one supplier, they can move around. And that's where Open RAN, I think, does give huge benefits. And as Patrick said earlier on, the core network has already undergone what Open RAN is doing to the radio access network. But being able to have that flexibility around what you deploy, the services that you want to provide, being able to harness the latest technology and not do complete network swap outs, I think gives the operators a really great advantage when it comes to being at the leading edge of technology. The downside to that is it comes with a huge responsibility, because now that you don't need to do huge network swap outs to be able to be at the leading edge of technology, the responsibility on network operators to be able to invest in the latest technology at the right time with end customers in mind is a huge responsibility, and one that I believe, working with the likes of neutral host networks as ourselves, we can allow them that flexibility to be able to deploy what they want when they need it. And ultimately, if you take a step back from this, as important as the technology is, Open RAN will be successful if all of the industry focuses on the outcomes that the operators and their end users need, not just what the technology can do. And, partnership, collaboration, important aspects of that the whole way through the life cycle.
Yeah, great points, Brendan. And I think we're seeing a stress on that point from the operators right now. They're laying out very clearly what they want in terms of the way their partners and suppliers not only deliver, but how they work together, and trying to make it easier for companies to understand what they want to deliver. So we're definitely seeing more of that. Okay, if there aren't any more additional comments on this topic, Guy... Oh, I'm sorry, Francis, beg your pardon. Francis, to you.
I was just going to reiterate, I think the key thing that Open RAN and the wider 5G environment is it fundamentally opens a whole number of options for the CSP in terms of the way they get to a customer. It gives them many more points of who do I get, how much do I give to somebody else, and my ability to manage maybe potentially somewhere I own the complete access and I use a neutral host and I use maybe other forms of access, which the existing standards, the previous standards haven't really allowed. You're either one thing or you're the other. So I think it's the technology is an enabler for different levels of disaggregation of the network and different interfaces and different business relationships in the RAN.
Yeah, absolutely. A great point. It provides those extra options, and as we know from past changes in the industry, very often all these things fit together. It's not one or the other. It provides just different opportunities for different types of companies. Okay, yeah. Excellent. Thanks for that, Francis. Guy, so back across to you for our next audience question.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. Before we do, a quick reminder to our viewers, keep the questions coming, please. We've had a couple of questions come in the past 5 or 10 minutes there. We'll get through as many of them as we can. So, Terry, your turn. What got you into telecoms? How did you get your start in this industry?
Yeah, I was trying to remind myself because I have almost 40 years in the industry. So, but actually, it's a bit of maybe a very simple answer to that. We are talking about the beginning of the 1980s, and I was on the entry to the university, and actually at that time there was such a great shortage of engineers in Norway, also working for the national operator at that time, that they actually sponsored the students throughout the complete master study at the university. So, paid salary at the age of 19, and then you get out with a master degrees on engineering, and then you can start, enjoying and working with the telecoms, which at that time were in the, the kind of the peak of the first what they call digitalization wave. We are talking about digital transmission and also digital switches with the CPUs, programming, and all those nice things in the beginning of the 1980s. So that's the simple answer to how I joined the telecom industry.
Excellent. What a great option for undergraduates at the time there. Get paid to do your masters and a job at the end. Fantastic. More of that, please, today, I think. Okay, so Terry, let's look at our next audience question, and it's about the vertical markets. The question is, which verticals have the most to gain from 5G services and why? And also, could the needs of verticals drive new enterprise-specific 5G MVNOs?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I think that's a great question, and of course, it's a question that everyone wants to know the answer on. So the practical approach, what we have chosen is that, of course, we can look into the verticals and the volumes and the benefits, both from our side as a provider, but also from the customer side. Although we have chosen to engage with concrete enterprises and then work with them rather on their exact benefits and what the needs are in the short term. But if you go back to the verticals, because I think it's a very valid and very good question still. So what we have seen is that we can divide maybe the needs in the short term and the long term. And if you go into our experience so far, then I'm not of course saying that we have the full solution to all these questions, but we see that the enterprises now on the short term, or call it immediate needs, ask for typically some kind of video analytics. So you need to have support high definition video quality, meaning the 5G speed. You also need to support a number of devices which are reporting like sensors or other kind of devices there, which is then not really 5G, but at least they need to support those very effectively. And then comes back to that you need to deliver this very robust. And that's coming back to one of the earlier questions about the 5G core, for example, and to what degree can you distribute it and have it on campus and so on. So the question, of course, is what kind of vertical do we find these kind of characteristics? And what we have seen is, which is probably also corresponding to some of these market survey, is that what we call manufacturing vertical is typically one of those where we find these on the short term. That means that they are using, for example, video analytics to recognize objects. They are using that for safety of people, and they're using that for recognizing people. They're using that for recognizing objects or animals or whatever. And they are also using a lot of sensors, and they are using also want to have it robust or maybe even on premises. So I think it's at least what we have seen so far is that the manufacturing, so-called manufacturing vertical, is seems to be a great potential or great place to start. Then, of course, the manufacturing verticals also typically covers areas like construction sites, for example, which are a bit dynamic. So you need to, put up the tools, put up everything you do there, and make the building or a bridge or whatever, and then you move on to the next location. So if you can avoid the cabling for doing that, it's a great saving for the construction companies. But manufacturing also typically include warehousing, which are on handling different objects and also recognizing them. Could be storage control and a lot of other things as well. And then of course we find warehousing also in retail vertical. But so I think it's as I said, in the very beginning, it's a good question. Yes, we find probably manufacturing coming with some of the big numbers. Then we're talking about on a global scale. Of course, you have to go into the different characteristics in each of the country when you're looking into what you should do in each of the countries. So I think it's a good place to start. And we also, in our dialogues with the customers in the so-called manufacturing vertical, they are very actually quick to find the savings themselves. So they will have a more efficient handling of the objects. They will save working time for employees. They will increase the safety. So there are a lot of kind of easy, or call it low-hanging fruits for those kind of companies to engage there. So I think, and then of course 5G can support, typically providing higher speed, which then allows higher resolution or better cameras, and then of course also better video analytics. So I think that's maybe one of the things there. But I think where I also started, it's very important to sit down and talk through with specific customers on what are the short-term needs they have. And we have, in that dialogue, we come across, two customers in the same vertical. Actually, they want to start rather different. They have quite different needs today, although on the longer term, they are probably converging towards the same solution. Then I think, Guy, back to the last part of the question, and I promise I will be much shorter now. In my mind, yes, there will be new roles, there will be new opportunities, and it's more like a question on who will succeed in taking those roles. And if the operators like ourselves, for example, are too laid back on not responding to the requests from the customers, there might be opportunities for others to take those roles. And those could be, for example, the virtual network operators or anyone else taking those roles. So yes, there will be opportunities for others as well to enter this setup.
Thank you very much, Terry. That's great. And I think we do, as an industry, sometimes tend to think of verticals as ubiquitous or showing the same characteristics. But the reality is, within each vertical, there's a lot of different approaches and ways to market here. Brendan, you'd like to come in on this question?
Yeah, I think I agree that manufacturing and things like transportation and construction all seem like verticals that would truly benefit from 5G initially. But I think the question that we have to ask ourselves and ask of our customers is there truly a vertical or an industry that won't be affected by 5G? And how do we have that conversation? And I think the point around that is, if we as a mobile operator or a neutral host or a private network provider or a vendor go in with the mindset of, I know the answer to your problem, we've probably listened or heard the wrong question. And so I think that the winners in 5G will be those who are able to pull together consortiums of vendors and service providers and be able to pull them together and collaborate clearly around an outcome. And I think the true winners in 5G will be those who are not necessarily pushing a single agenda, but absolutely focused on the outcome of the customers that they're talking to. And I think that's the unique opportunity here. It's not like 2G, 3G or 4G where there are very simplistic answers to connectivity questions. That the possibilities are truly endless. And I think it's about asking the right questions and ultimately, to all of us as technologists, listening.
Yes, we talk a lot, but don't often listen, do we? And Francis?
I was going to say we in our research did some analysis on the edge area, and I think there's some similarities here. I think there is definitely a success in verticals for 5G, but I think in the same way as our analysis on edge, you kind of need to move away from use cases to the underlying business drivers. Why will a vertical want to use 5G? And we always say things like latency, etc. But we need to move beyond that one. It's perfectly possible for an enterprise to get over latency by simply having equipment on their site, which doesn't necessarily need to be on 5G. So we need to be asking ourselves some pretty fundamental questions about if I introduce a network into the problem, which is a cost. Where am I taking cost out for the vertical? If I replace an Ethernet cable with a 5G connection, where have I introduced innovation and where have I introduced cost? Because fundamentally, that is the thing that will enable a vertical to take on 5G. I agree with the points before. I think you can already identify that in manufacturing. There are large savings to be made by actually just taking the management of the network away from the manufacturer in terms of having to run it. There's certainly mobility capabilities in terms of transport. As examples, but I think we need to be a little less focused on the use case and much more about why do you move this problem to the network, and where are the business benefits to moving it into the network.
All right, good points, everyone. Thank you very much indeed for that. In that case, Ray, I think we'll move on and come to you for our next question.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. And this question actually comes from a bit of a business angle as well. And so far we've had questions directed to individuals. Now this is a question for the group. What sort of proof points will operators look for before they target human and financial resources at their Open RAN efforts? Are operators sharing information? So essentially, at what point and from what proof points will operators decide, okay, it's time to invest time, money and resource into Open RAN as a network option? Does anybody want to come in on this with any thoughts? Brendan, thank you.
Yeah, I think just to start, I think the time has already passed, if I'm honest. And if I look at the UK, where effectively there are 2, possibly 3 suppliers for RAN at the moment, and a number of the operators are having to do large swap outs, the inflection point has been and gone, and therefore Open RAN is a very serious need for the UK MNOs, because that is how they will effectively drive experience long term and efficiency. And because of the European-wide market and different ownership across Europe, that means the major players in Europe are looking at that. And that's what we've seen over the last couple of days with the Open RAN announcements that have been made. I think that the true proof point about whether it will work or not is still to come, but the desire and the need is absolutely there. And I think that as we move throughout the end of this year and into 2022, those larger scale deployments that all the operators are talking about will show how reliable Open RAN is and whether it can stand up to a legacy swap out in the way that it didn't have to with the Rakuten model.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brendan. And okay, Terje next, and then we'll come down to Patrick and Francis. So Terje.
Yeah, thanks. I fully agree with what Brendan said. So I think it's probably we are past that time. And as you also said that during the last days we have seen announcement from several operators that they are, I wouldn't say committed, but at least allocating a lot of people and also money on this. For example, by taking ownership of some of the upcoming companies or the vendors in this space. And the same on our side. We also allocating people to work on this and to push that forward, and engaging with a number of other partners and parties to develop this further and to validate what's the situation today, where we are, and what are the pain points to decide on the trigger point for when we should move the switch on this one. And I think it's important. What's also what I think Brendan mentioned, that of course the operators are a bit in a different situations. For example, comparing the greenfield, for example, what we've seen from what we would call greenfield, at least from Rakuten, while many of us are in the brownfield area where we actually are talking about replacement, or we could actually also talk about some of these new 5G applications, which could be private networks, which might also benefit from the Open RAN logic there. So as I said, there are, I think the time has passed. We are allocating resources and trying to push this forward.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Taya. Patrick, over to you. Thank
you. So I mainly work in the 5G core space, but because of the flexibility we see there, I also can map it to the Open RAN activity and how the proof points could look like. I see two proof points, and basically one of them is moving away from these monolithic radio network units that may create a kind of vendor lock-in for the operator, to basically have a black box installed across the country where you basically cannot look into. So bringing it to the Open RAN architecture that basically decomposes these monolithic units into more granular architecture, radio unit, distributed unit, central unit, also allows the operators to build best of breed radio access networks, and also then basically put some distance between the radio units and the central units that can be, I don't know, up to 100 miles or maybe more. And because the telco equipment suppliers traditionally do not compete with the telco operators, you can then really, by having a Open RAN interoperable standardized architecture, deploy best of breed solutions either at the radio access side or at the central unit side, hundreds of miles away. So those are the two topics: avoiding a vendor lock-in and benefiting from the distributed Open RAN architecture.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Patrick. And Francis, has the time already gone to be considering this? Did the operators need to be all in and putting resources behind their Open RAN efforts?
I think we've got to consider two very distinct journeys or routes. I think, as particularly Brendan said, that we've already reached the point where Open RAN needs to be seriously considered by operators. Pretty much, although largely that is on the basis of it's another RAN technology or effectively another network equipment vendor, and ultimately the success of that will come down to is it reducing my capex in terms of being able to deploy RAN? Is it reducing it from a point of view of competition because of the lack of or the perceived lack of competition in the area? I think there's a second very distinct strand which will drive a whole series of other decisions, which is tied to very much tied to Rakuten and the greenfield model, which is, if I adopt the Open RAN in its fullest sense, more as a method, as a philosophy almost, am I getting the much higher operational savings and the innovation savings? And I think that we're still at the point where the jury is still out on there. There's definitely encouraging noises from the likes of Rakuten, and there are others, in terms of fundamental changes to the operational cost base of a telco and the ability to innovate. We're not there yet, but I think there's a very separate strand which will drive a kind of, this isn't about RAN replacement per se, it's about a much wider operational and business change within telcos.
Yeah, there's no doubt there's the potential there for a great upheaval in operation and the culture, I think, coming back to what you mentioned, the way that that operators are interacting with their partners as well. Lots of change going on. I've never known a time in this industry where there were more moving parts than there are now. Very interesting stuff. Okay, thanks everybody for your comments. Guy, I think it's time to go back over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. And it's time to check in with our audience poll, because we have a new poll for each day of the summit. It's just one question, 5 multiple choice answers right here on the website. It's simple, it's quick, it's easy to complete. Now, today's question is, are mobile operators best placed to meet the 5G needs of enterprises across multiple industry verticals? And you can see the current split of opinions right here as we look at real-time data from the website. And glancing down at that, it looks like, well, almost half of respondents say there's potential, but there's still a lot of hard work to do. I think I'd probably tick that box as well, but I should be impartial. So let us know what you think and click on your answer selection. We're keeping the polls open all week, and the more responses we get, the more representative it will be. Okay, back to our Q&A, and we still have just about time for a couple more questions, hopefully. So over to you, Ray, for our next viewer question.
Okay, thanks, Guy. And here's a question that's come in. I think this is the question mentions Open RAN, but I think this is more broadly applicable. And the question is, how important is having edge compute deployed to being able to deploy an Open RAN architecture? So the question is about access, availability, or even, I guess, potentially an operator running their own edge compute or having access maybe to a hyperscaler's edge compute resource. How important is this to Open RAN? Does anybody want to comment on that relationship, edge computing and Open RAN?
I can maybe start, if I may.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
From
thank you,
from our because we were looking into the deployment models with Open RAN, and then of course part of those like for example the central unit could typically run on a cloud platform, and then we can always discuss then that come to an edge cloud platform or would it be a dedicated platform itself. But and part of the saving, coming back to what I think Francis also mentioned earlier, from the Open RAN comes from higher utilization of some of the hardware resources, which typically could be coming from using a common cloud platform. Then we will see that in some of the cases, if you have an edge cloud, you can also put some of the Open RAN components there. For example, typically the central unit and definitely also the controller. Could be run on the same cloud platform, and that's something we could demonstrate probably last week or probably even further back in time, because those are not very time sensitive in that sense, or real time critical in that sense. So what we see is that there's a benefit of having a cloud platform for supporting some of the Open RAN component, and of course there will be also synergy if you have edge cloud there as well. Having said that, I think it's also important to look into the security aspect of this, and it comes back to how risk willing would an operator or anyone be to run different network functions on the same hardware resources, or would they still try to isolate or separate these kind of applications? And what we see is that quite a few of the hyperscalers as well as the operators tend to isolate some of the applications in one way or the other. So it's probably yes and no, I guess, to the question. There is a synergy of having cloud and Open RAN. It's not all the way. It needs to look into the very practical and the detailed design on what are the actual gains doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points, Terje. Okay, yeah, I think everybody wants on this. We'll come to Brendan first and then down to Patrick after that. So Brendan.
Yeah, so I agree with the last point, but I think ultimately it's a secondary question. The first question is what problem, what challenge are we trying to solve, and therefore what role will the technologies play in the outcome? And I feel like sometimes as a technology industry, we sometimes miss the listening angle that I talked about earlier on. And these are all very, very important questions, but it's not a black and white situation. There is a huge amount of grey in here, and the grey comes from listening to our customers' needs, understanding them, and then using technology to help facilitate an outcome that is desirable for them and for us. And so for me, they're really, really important questions. But the fundamental first question is, what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and can these technologies affect the outcome?
Okay, yep, great point. Patrick, down to you and then to Francis.
Yeah, so I agree what Brandon said. To me, it's also the matter of how you want to use these two technologies. So the mobile edge computing is basically creating a user plane processing unit that is not collocated with a 5G core. So you can do basically, let's say, surveillance or video analysis right at the spot where the user traffic happens. But the Open RAN that basically goes further, that extends basically the radio access network that starts with a central unit where the mobile edge computing also may happen further across additional considerable distance, into a place where the radio units reside. So to me, it's like chaining core mobile edge computing and then the radio unit. And then in the end, the radio unit may reside somewhere in a shopping mall or in a office complex, where you have this neutral host network, for instance, for many, many closed user groups with all the challenges. But, if you would run some kind of surveillance or video data analytics, right, also in this building complex, that would somehow, spoil the use case. So it's really, like Brandon said, the matter for what use case you want to use it. And basically, it mainly allows you to cross large distances and place the processing, the application for the user data as close to where the activity happens.
Okay, yes, excellent point. And Francis, over to you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to totally agree with Brendan. It's about what the user needs is the key driver. I think a useful thing for telcos is actually really to separate out two distinct problems. There is a set of telco business drivers that require an edge cloud that supports things like an Open RAN or a distributed core. That is a necessity. That is completely separate from a need of an enterprise or a consumer in terms of why they would use edge beyond just simply the network area. There are significant reasons why the other applications will require the edge thing, but they're not intrinsically tied to the network technology. Others can provide it. In fact, web scalers often are in this area already, and again, the telco. Terry mentioned that the issue of security is there's a kind of balance point between the two. Is you can absolutely protect your telco edge cloud and not put third party applications on it, completely segmented, but at which point you completely de-differentiate yourself in terms of anybody else putting an edge cloud in, because that is segmented as well. So I think there's a need to see that we need to disentangle the need of a telco for an edge cloud and what other enterprise verticals and consumer verticals would require an edge cloud, and then we need to see how those go together in a way that the telco has a significant advantage in delivering that metro edge cloud, because otherwise they are intrinsically, if they can't create that differential, they are intrinsically competing against anybody else that can put an edge cloud in place.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, great points there, and a great selection of points from that question. So thank you to all. And looking at the clock here, I think we've actually overrun a little bit, Guy, already, have we?
We're fast approaching 50 minutes, so that, I'm afraid, is time up, and we have reached the end of the show. We've had such a great discussion and an inclusive discussion as well. Time flies when you're having fun. Thank you so much to all of our guests who joined us for this live program. It was great. And also to the audience for sending in your questions, and apologies if we've missed a few questions out there. Now that is the end of our 5G Evolution Summit for this year. But before we go, we want to let you know about our post-show report. Ray.
Yes, once I've sunk a post-show mug of tea, I'll be selecting the highlights of the 5G Evolution Summit for our post-show delegate report, which will be available soon to everyone who is registered. Not only that, all registrants also gain access to a special report on 5G market developments from our research partner Deloro. And it's all free. We're very good to our registrants, Guy.
We do aim to please. Now, if you'd like to mark your calendars, we have a special one-day summit on open access later this month. That's on Wednesday, the 26th of May. And then we follow that with the return of our popular Edgeonomics Summit. A bit earlier this year, that's going to be in June.
June, yeah, that's going to be a busy month. Well, but this has been a great summit, guys. So I'm really looking forward to those already. And I'll see you there.
You will indeed, and we hope that you all can join us as well. So until the next DSP Leaders, from all of us here at TelecomTV, thank you for watching and goodbye.
The after show was recorded in front of a live online audience.